Hello, and welcome to In the Rising podcast. My name is Bettina Brown, and I am the host of this show. Now, I created In the Rising podcast because I was working one-on-one with hundreds of women going through breast cancer and other people going through different types of cancer. And there was just this one relating theme every single time. When I overcome, I will do this differently. And so I thought about, what about if we can rise up right then and there and not have to have such a big diagnosis? So on top of creating fitafterbreastcancer.com, I created In the Rising podcast to talk about how we can rise up. And my guest today is Alena Turley, and wow, does she have a story about transformation, transforming her life and really the legacy of her children, her family, and making an impact for all the women that she encounters, becoming inspiration, becoming motivation, and unboxing themselves into other roles besides just being a mom. Thank you so much, Alena, for being part of In the Rising podcast. I am super excited to talk to you today.
Thanks, Bettina. It's so lovely to be here.
And I'm going to say on record, I adore your glasses. I just love it.
For the podcast listeners, and they're large and dark, and they're sort of a bit like the designer in Minions. No, in The Incredibles. They're sort of like those,
Yes.
big black.
And I loved them in that movie too. And so I'm really happy to have you. You're just a lot of things. You're a holistic mother, mentor for mothers. You are a mother. You're a martial artist. Yes. And you're a podcaster as well. So you cover a lot of bases. And I'm really interested in learning more about where you came up with the Soul Mama Hub, because there's an underlying story of why this became important for you.
Yeah, there is. So thank you for having me on to share this story. It's my favorite story to share, mainly because I went through a lot of stuff, and I really like letting women especially know that if there's a lot of stuff going on in your life, just keep going, just keep swimming, and the various things that I overcame to be where I am today. I guess first off, a little bit of early life adversity and some separation and divorce and some adverse life experiences in my very early years. And then that led into other things that came up for me. And I guess I probably was a bit of a self-medicating mental health type person, where I ended up in active addiction for probably more than 10 years. And it culminated in me finding myself having experienced a fair amount of domestic abuse, and actually had an experience of being attacked at my home by an ex-partner, which led to a year of PTSD. So I've experienced PTSD and also borderline eating disorders as a result of that. And then when I was pregnant with my first child, I was in a really difficult situation where there was kind of a nexus of all of these things coming together, and I wasn't able to be self-medicating the way I always had. And so I found myself again experiencing a lot of stress in a less than ideal relationship, a lot of love, but also a lot of our trauma was playing out in that relationship. And becoming a parent can often trigger your own issues with your childhood. So that was happening. It was this kind of confluence of things all at once. And I found myself really low in weight, and my child was born very low birth weight, like a premature baby, but he was actually born full term. So I found myself in this position where we separated when he was about 4 months old. So I was a single mother, actively in addiction, pretty alienated most of my friends and family. And that culminated by the time he was about 2 in a week of homelessness and deep soul searching at that point, where I was, with a child, with no partner, no real work to speak of. I'd been thrown out of the last place I'd been couch surfing. All of my belongings had actually been thrown on the road. It was just, it was nuts, And I fortunately had a couple of really caring people who stepped in and said, "You're not doing so well. Something has to change." And so I kind of embarked on this mission. I went to a 12-step program for a few years, and I helped to heal some of my addiction issues. And then I kind of began to look differently at my life. I started to consider what was it that I needed to do in order to grow into the kind of person I wanted to be, and I went through this big process, 5 years of deep personal development and being on my own and rebuilding my work life. I
Yeah.
started studying construction. I had been in film and in administration, I suppose. And so I started studying construction, and I began working part time as an admin assistant and personal assistant for a stuntman. I did a bunch of different things, and I started to really look at how I was parenting and what was coming up for me, and reflecting on how I wanted to create a life that was more aware of our custodians, of being a custodian for the environment. How do we become a custodian for the natural world in the modern day, with the pressures
Mm.
of all the modern day,
Yeah.
during early motherhood, on my own. So I started a blog, and that was kind of how the Soul Mama Hub began, was about in 2009, so 14 years ago now. It was a really early days for the blogging world, and
Yes.
it's evolved a lot since then, and it's still there, the Soul Mama Hub blog, and I love it still. I don't post on it quite as often because I have a podcast, but essentially what I did was I discovered there were certain key steps that I needed to take to get from I'm homeless, addicted, and alone, and completely burnt out by life, and trauma, to now married with two kids and a dog, and a flourishing career and a business and a podcast and various other things. Martial arts, just got my black belt last year in Hapkido, so I instruct women in martial arts as well. And I feel, first of all, deeply grateful for the fact that I can sit here today and say that to you,
Mhm.
because I don't think it was always going to be that way. But also deeply grateful to be able to now do this work with other women. And not many of them are in deep adversity, but the things that I used, I guess, to get from there to here are really applicable to lots of people in lots of situations, So it's been really nice to kind of go, okay, well, I kind of now know how to support other people to take steps towards their biggest, boldest dreams. What an incredible thing. And it's very personal, but I
Yeah,
really love to that's my favorite thing to mentor people about.
that is. That's an incredible story. And thank you for sharing it. And thank you also for acknowledging the vulnerability to share such a story, because
Yeah,
in just sharing that, there is always going to be some judgment, right? Well,
sure.
what kind of mom?
Yeah, yeah,
You should
sure.
that should have woken you up that moment.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy. It's easy to talk. It's a lot more
Mm,
difficult to act. And I think it's even a lot more difficult to remain consistent in actions that are not what you're used to. And it
mm,
sounds like that's for you, where you made this realization and then
mm.
you said, I looked into myself very deeply for 5 years. A lot of us don't look very deeply into ourselves for 5 minutes because we're afraid of what we might see there, and
Yep.
have to acknowledge the way we feel. And yet you kept
Yeah.
pursuing that because you knew there was something better on the other end of that.
Yeah, I was pretty relentless. I had a lot of support as well. And I think the key thing that comes back to me time and time again is that we need to connect within, and we need to be brave, as you say, and look at the things we would rather not. Definitely. But to do that on your own is virtually impossible. Like, there was the only way I could do that was because I sought the help I needed in lots of various different forms. And I feel like that's my ultimate blessing, is that I can now share that kind of support with others, because I know that despite our best intentions, it's very, very difficult to make changes deeply and lasting in any lasting way
Mhm.
without connection, without a community or connection in some way.
I like that you mentioned intention because, just 30 days ago was the
Yeah.
beginning of the year when we make a
Yes.
lot of resolutions and we have brand new intentions. And I think the studies are that by the 13th or 14th of January, all of that is blown out of the water.
Yeah, so
It
true.
remains a nice thought. The intention is nice, but it's the action to continue to follow up and
Mm.
seek the help to go, including listening to podcasts, reading books, having
Yeah,
conversation, having therapy. And so
absolutely.
you started this, it sounds like the Soul Mama Hub was something that also helped you in your healing process at that
Oh,
time.
100%. Absolutely. I think for me, creating and sharing is actually a huge part of my healing, and it continues to be. So I think when we are able to share our story authentically and show up in life authentically, like really authentically, not
Yeah.
just I'm going to be authentic, a flippant throwaway line, but I mean, really do the work to be able to come as you are and as all of you are at any given moment. That is powerful. And I shared about this on TV recently, actually. It was funny. And I got asked the question, do you really think that helps people? And I was like, yeah, I really do, because we need to hear the stories of other people so that we can make sense of our own story. That's something we've done for a really long time as human beings. And if you look at something potentially we can learn from the many various First Nations or Indigenous or Aboriginal cultures here in Australia, storytelling is a huge part of those cultures, and for good reason. It's
Mhm.
human to do that, and that's why podcasts are so good, right? Because
Yeah.
we get to connect with stories of other people. So I will continue to, and I won't say it's fearlessly share my story. It's not fearless at all. I just I do it with the fear. I do the things that I do with the fear, because the power and the compelled I'm compelled to share it because of the potential for healing for other people and the potential to serve other people. That
Mhm.
for me outweighs the fear and the shame that I've carried before around it, but it's taken some doing. It's taken a lot of different things to become comfortable enough to admit to some of the things I admit to in my story, right? And to take
Yeah.
full responsibility for those things. Like, I'm not doing that as a victim or in blame. I totally understand why the people that were played a part in that story did what they did. And I forgive them 100%. I don't hold any resentment or blame. So there's a lot of work to be done on forgiveness to be
Mhm.
able to tell your story when it involves the actions of other people, right?
Yeah. And that's also an honoring conversation just in itself to acknowledge
Mm,
where what they did and where
thanks.
why they probably did. And they
Mm,
also have a story, and the people
right.
who did whatever to them also have a story. And
Yeah.
so that takes some work through life, and
Mm,
everyone has a different pace of when they can acknowledge, if they will, and to also provide the grace and the compassion and empathy
yeah.
for that in
Yeah. I
that.
so agree with you. Thank you for saying that. That's beautiful. And I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned fear and shame, and I think, especially when we're talking about motherhood, I think there are just some words that come to mind, right? It's
Yeah.
miracle, blessing,
Yeah.
love, life-changing. And then there are these other words that also ring true for so many, and that's lonely, perfectionism, uh, fatigue,
Yes.
and
Yes.
comparison. And
Yes.
what
Guilt.
you
That's a big one.
guilt. The guilt is, I think that's the book title, The Mama
Mm.
Guilt. And then someone told me recently, there are good moms that work. And she
Mm.
just let
I
it go.
love that.
You're right,
100%.
and that's okay. And just that was, that there was a period there was nothing else. There are still good moms, and they work, and they do this.
Mm.
uh there are a lot of moms who are struggling as well
Mm.
with fatigue. And fatigue, I think, comparing, because we used to raise children more in a familial, like in a village.
Yes.
There
Yeah.
were it was never just you. There was a community. And
Yeah.
because of choices or life or distance, we don't really have that anymore. And
That's right.
feel that. What
Mm.
have you seen in from women that talk to you?
Yeah, absolutely. That isolation and disconnection that so many women experience, particularly through early motherhood, but it can continue for many years.
Mhm.
I think it's all too common. It's become almost like a cultural disease, you know? It's something that we have created in our modern, urban, particularly urban Western culture. And now we stand and we look at it, and as certainly as women and mothers commonly question it, you know, really question it. And then how do we find an alternative? How do we find an antidote? Is the next question. And I think often we don't, is the real answer. The times when I have felt something different through, I've had three different children in three different circumstances, and I've each time I've learned something different. The one time I didn't feel alone was when I lived in a smaller city in England, and I went to groups, support groups that were run by volunteers, 2, 3 times a week. And it was very powerful. And yes, I still felt a little isolated, but it was far better.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I think I build communities now online and also locally where I live, is because I really feel sad that so many women have experienced that and continue to experience it when it's not necessary.
Hmm.
And it comes out of a lot of different things. It comes out of our inability to ask for help and our inability to be vulnerable. You know, we're not conditioned or taught how to do those things very well anymore. Some of us are, but I'm generalizing. And so then we find ourselves in a position where we are forced to ask for help, and then we feel like we're failing
Hmm.
if we show weakness or we show vulnerability. And you would think that wouldn't be there anymore, but it is. It really is. And
Yeah. It's alive and well.
yeah, even if it's just in the background, you know.
Hmm.
And we've come a long way with it. We've come a long way in being able to talk about maternal mental health. We've come a long way in being able to see the research of various practitioners all over the world who are challenging these stereotypes. But it's still well and truly, like you say, alive and well.
Hmm.
So, so I think the antidote really is, first we need to ask questions. How important really is it for us to appear strong and in control? And where is that coming from?
Yeah.
Where does that come from in you? Can you address that in another way? Can you acknowledge that that thought or that belief is not relevant in your experience as a mother, and it's time to let that go? Can you surround yourself with people you feel safe amongst and supported by? And how can you do that? So my community is one way, but there's a lot of ways these days. So I think that we just need to ask questions, and we need to really, like you say, be so gentle and really shine deep self-compassion on
Hmm.
it. Really shine the light of self-compassion on our thinking, on our feelings, on our experience as much as we can, because that's often what's lacking, is that deep self-compassion. You know, we replace it with comparison and high expectations.
Absolutely. And I feel that the words with the hyphen self-compassion has been said to me at least 5 times in the last 3 weeks. So
It's
it,
becoming a really big thing, isn't it?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And people have also talked to me about how they're learning some self-compassion. It sounds crazy
Right.
because we're having compassion for other people and build, and we're
Right.
also taught that you have to be there for others. It's helpful, but you
Yeah.
also have to allow others to be there for you.
Yes.
And that's a huge
Yes.
one. That's where you build with the community.
This is a really interesting topic. It comes up a lot with the women that I work with, that because we're in a culture of individualism,
Mhm.
okay, so we've become a little bit transactional. We don't mean to,
Mhm.
but we have become a little bit transactional. So when we receive help, we fear that either it reflects badly on us or that we might then owe that person something. But I ask you to think about this. When somebody says to you, I really need some help, can you help me? And you are able to help them, and you say, yeah, sure, of course, what do you need? You know, the feeling that you get when that person trusts you enough to ask for your help and allows you into that vulnerable space, how do you feel? You feel naturally good. You feel
Mhm.
needed, you feel connected, you feel part of something. These are feelings we need that are quite rare in our society. And if you reflect on what a blessing it is to you when someone allows you to help them, I ask you to think about that the next time you ask for help. Now, if they say no, no problem. Don't be embarrassed. It just means they're not able to do it. Ask someone else. It's no big deal. But if they say yes, you're bestowing a blessing upon them. And I don't mean that in a religious way. I mean, you are inviting someone into your space to support
Absolutely.
you, and they will feel good about that if they truly care. And I'm sure you would only ask someone that truly cares. So that's something they feel good about. That's why people volunteer. That's because it feels good.
Yeah. I heard something one time that sometimes the most selfish thing that you can do is to be helping somebody else because it feels
Yeah.
so good. And
Yes.
it's something that you just it lifts you up and it rises you up, but also acknowledging that someone else would like to feel that way too. So let them
Yeah,
help
that's
you.
right. And then
There's the
the other
point.
part of it that's really complex and tricky sometimes for women is that we are very deeply conditioned, especially as mothers, to give and to give and to
Mhm.
give. And so our receiving muscle, the bit of us that allows someone to help us, that has our hands open, receiving, is not very conditioned.
Mhm.
So sometimes we're just not used to receiving. So we're so conditioned to say, if someone says, "Do you need a hand?" No, no, I'm fine. No, no. You're struggling with the shopping and the baby or whatever. An old person, even struggling with things, will very rarely accept help. So we need to practice a little bit that receiving muscle. We need to get it back into shape,
Yeah.
and just say yes and gracefully receive what is offered to you. And I think saying yes to help is a big mum lesson for sure.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, is it? So
Yeah.
you've done a lot. Your community, you have a supportive community of mothers who are talking about flirting with burnout. Sometimes I don't think it's flirting, I think it's a marriage. It's
Yeah.
straight up connected.
Right.
And to feel more inspired and empowered and energy. So share more about your community and how did you even begin this really?
Well, about 2 years ago, I had a yearning to offer support, but I just didn't really know how to do it. I've got this kind of mixed bag of qualifications and really deep experience of transformation in my own life. And I wasn't quite sure what container I could put it in. I didn't want to be a therapist. I'm not trained as a therapist. I'm trained as an educator, and I'm really good at bringing people together and holding space. So I started this community just after my grandmother died, and she very cryptically said to me, "You have a gift, Elena, it's in your heart." And I didn't know what it meant. And so I undertook this little kind of journey, I guess, a little quest to find out what does that mean and what can I do with it. And I ended up with the idea of starting a community for women that was reasonably affordable and really accessible 24/7.
Mhm.
So what we do is I invite various experts and practitioners in to present, and I sometimes present as well on the things that I'm expert in. And we kind of put tools in the toolbox, and we do that in the context of a really safe and supportive community. So it's a group on socials, and then it's also a portal in which you can go and skill up and learn these beautiful skills and go to workshops and have experiences each month that nourish you and support you and give you a sense that you are just having a moment to yourself.
And not isolated.
Yeah, and connected to a community of
Mhm.
like-minded women who are also seeking the same kind of goals. It's a bit of inspiration, a bit of empowerment, a bit of energy. How do we nurture ourselves? It's all very well to say, just do some self-care, but it's a little too simplistic. So this
Yeah,
supports that process.
it's a very umbrella statement for sure.
Mm.
And you also have an online program, Lion Life Roadmap, and I love the lion, the idea of that. I'd like you to share a little bit about that as well.
Oh, thank you for asking me, Tina. So, the Line Life Roadmap is the program that I encourage women to follow. And what we do is we add to it every month with these workshops. So, it's essentially a recorded version and also a kind of strategic roadmap from I'm really burned out, I'm really exhausted, I don't know where to start taking care of myself, and I need my energy back, and I need to remember who I am, all the way through these 5 stages till you get to the part of it that's more, okay, I know who I am again now, and I have a bigger purpose beyond motherhood. Alongside motherhood, I'm showing up as the best mum possible, and I'm pursuing these bigger dreams and starting to take steps out into the world, or maybe already out in the world, and getting really clear on my purpose. So those stages kind of take you from that, I really don't know what to do to take care of myself, I'm depleted and burnt out, to I'm living in alignment with my principles and I'm really intentionally on purpose. So there's 5 stages, and it just takes you through each stage. And one of the stages is actually about sustainability and making your home more in line with your values.
And sharing, your values and reevaluating your values, because a lot of us are operating on the values of other people, or
Right.
we're operating on the values that we had when we're 18 or 20, and now we're
Right.
30, 40, 50, and we feel disconnected, and it's because that's not what's important to us anymore. And
Right.
I also love that you shared things outside of being a mom.
Yeah.
Because being a mom is a beautiful part of your life, but that if that is all of your life, it's all consuming, and it's
Yeah.
also demanding on the children. And there is
Yeah.
something to you still wonderful in addition to the
Yeah, we
mom.
need something for ourselves. And I think it's a bit of a myth that we have to choose either ourselves or being a
Yeah.
great mom. Like you say, you can work and be a great mom. It's not either or. And I think that's so important. And it's a value that I really talk about quite a lot. It's a big one for us, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So say there's a mom listening and she's like, you know what? I can relate to her story, her personal story, or I feel like, yes, I am exhausted and I need to have my own time to face the things that I really don't want to face, but I know that I will be a better mom. And if I want
Yeah.
to be an awesome mom, I need to look in that. How can they learn more about you?
Oh, I want to send a lot of love to that woman right now, first of all, and say, you're not broken, lady. Just come and hang out with us. So there's a lot of ways you can get in touch. I hang out a lot on Instagram and on Facebook, so you can find me there at Soul Mama Hub, SOULMAMA Hub. And you can also just come to my website and have a look around, which is alenaturley.com, and you'll see the spelling in the show notes. So, but I really love to hear from women, and there's a wait list for my membership. I don't have it open all the time because I like to love on my members and keep the doors
Mhm.
closed and really curate the space carefully and with all my heart. So I open it up about 3 times a year at this stage. So you can always get on the wait list for the membership. But in the meantime, there's plenty of other stuff going on. And if you're really, really, really stuck, I am opening up some one-to-one mentorship sessions at the moment. So that's coming soon as well. So just jump on any of those. And I would love to hear from you if this resonated with you.
Absolutely. And like you said, it will be in the show notes. And I am just so grateful for your time today. And thanks for loving on other people and on moms. And
Oh, it's a
I know
pleasure.
that made a huge difference for your own kiddos.
Thank you so much for having me, Bettina. It's been lovely to hang out.
So if you were listening to this show, maybe your gut reaction was similar to mine. I did not see Alena's story coming. Really homeless and being a mother and addiction. But at the same time, doesn't she have a story of inspiration that she made a conscious decision to change the life and the life of her kids and everything going from there? And then she also honored a call to be of service. And what about if that call is for you? What if that call is to share this podcast and help put this story in the hands and ears of someone who really needs it right now? So I encourage you and I invite you to do that. And I also invite you to leave a 5-star review or an honest review of this podcast so that we can reach it out to the people that need it most. I am so grateful for your time because you know what? That's the one thing we never get back. And until next Tuesday, let's keep building one another up.